Psychological safety is one of two ingredients needed to create high-performing and innovative teams. My name is Dr. George Hanshaw. I'm the Director of E-Learning Operations here at Los Angeles Pacific University, and I want to walk you through how to build psychological safety within your team and why it's so important to do so. If you'd like to contact me, my email is ghanshaw@lapu.edu. Feel free to drop me a note. And thank you for taking the time to watch this presentation on psychological safety because it's such an important topic. So let's just dive in. Look at Google's Project Aristotle. So in the news lately, this is one of the biggest findings for psychological safety. In the news lately, psychological safety has been happening for a long time. There's two recent books, one by Amy Edmondson called The Fearless Organization, and one by Timothy R. Clark, The 4 Stages of Psychological Safety. They're fantastic books on psychological safety, and I really like Timothy Clark's book on the 4 stages of psychological safety because it gives you specific behaviors. And we're going to go over a few of those behaviors in order to build your way to psychological safety. Google's Project Aristotle found that psychological safety was the number one component for building innovative and high-performing teams. The other 4 of the 5 fell under what we call performance standards. So Google's Project Aristotle found 5 components to create a high-performing and innovative team. Psychological safety was by far the number one, and then elements 2, 3, 4, and 5 all fell under what we call performance standards. So Google's project, you've probably heard of Project Aristotle, and it's helped give psychological safety a lot of playtime in the media and within our circles of team building and management, leading, and all of that. This has been hugely beneficial for creating psychological safety. So let's see, what is psychological safety? Psychological safety is rewarded vulnerability. So think of this as a team environment where vulnerability is rewarded. So you can bring your whole self to work. You can bring who you are and you can bring your thoughts and your ideas to work because people want to make a difference. People want to really, when they see something that doesn't work as well as it could, they want to be a part of the solution. So it's that rewarded vulnerability. That vulnerability and, psychological safety is a team concept, a team construct, because it happens at the team level. That makes it a little bit different than trust. Trust happens on an individual level, where psychological safety is a belief that you can bring your whole self to work and others on your team are not going to ridicule and really make it difficult for you to bring your whole self to work. And that is set up by the leader. The leader, the group leader, sets up the environment of psychological safety. It starts with the leader. So if you're leading a team, the responsibility is yours. And sometimes people think that, introvert or extrovert matter when it comes to psychological safety, and none of the personality constructs such as introversion or extroversion make a difference in terms of the effectiveness of psychological safety. So as a leader, it's your responsibility to bring your whole self to work and create an environment of psychological safety. We're going to talk about what Timothy R. Clark calls the 4 stages of psychological safety, which is inclusion safety, learner safety, then we have contributor safety, and then we have challenger safety. We're going to talk about those and your responsibilities as a leader to create those. And once we get to that challenger safety, which is really psychological safety, that's that rewarded vulnerability, we can always knock ourselves back down those steps as well. So it's important to continually cultivate that environment. Think about this. So the first thing that happens when you walk into a new team, you're just hired, you can be the leader, you can be an employee, you can be anywhere along the continuum of leadership. The first thing that happens as a human, we walk in with threat detection turned on. So we're figuring out, am I safe to be myself in this environment? If the answer is no, I'm not safe, What are you going to do as a person if it's not safe to, let's say, bring your ideas? Um, it's not safe to uh, have a counter idea or a counter thought to the group leader. Well, the first thing that I would do, and that I have done in the past when working in those situations where it's not safe to bring my whole self to work, it's not safe to be vulnerable, simply guard it. And what do I mean by guard it? I don't bring those ideas. Those ideas will come up, but I will not bring them out. And that directly relates to the environment that I'm working in. And remember, that environment starts with the leader. So as a group leader, it's our responsibility to create psychological safety. Now, if I walk in and I look around, so take a second to think about, what is it like to walk in and say, hey, I can be vulnerable here. What does that look like? And kind of what does that feel like as well? What specific actions will you take? Well, for me, I'm going to let my guard down, and I'm going to bring up ideas, bring up concepts, and bring up ideas that are not fully formed yet, because I want to present them so others on the team have an opportunity to create and help those ideas grow as well. Because I know that my idea, as wonderful as I think it is, once those multiple perspectives from the team start coming in, it's going to be better. So that's why that initial threat detection that we go through, it's so important to have our team set up so when newcomers come in, they do not detect a threat. They detect that safety. Because when they start throwing out those ideas, that's how those other perspectives come on and we grow concepts. That is the nature of innovation and high performance. So let's talk about psychological safety and performance standards just for a moment. If you have, now this goes from low to high, low to high. So if we have low psychological safety and low performance standards, so what is a performance standard? How, goals, timelines, things like that. Nobody cares here. You're going to have a whole lot of turnover. The people that stay are just going to be writing it out and not doing much of anything. Now, if I come up here, if I have high psychological safety and low performance standards, I may actually enjoy my colleagues at work. We'll have a collegial relationship and we may actually have fun, but there's no meaning involved with that because I'm not connecting my work to something higher than myself. There's no real friction there. And psychological safety requires us to have creative and intellectual friction. And you can only have good creative and intellectual friction when you have psychological safety. And we're going to go over that a little bit more in a moment. So lack of meaning zone. So what happens in a zone like that? Lots of turnover because people like going to work, but guess what? They don't have that meaning. They don't feel like they're putting forth something better. Their ideas aren't being heard. It doesn't really matter what they're doing. Now, on the opposite spectrum, we have low psychological safety and high standards. So there's still managers out there that operate with high standards, low psychological safety. What does that look like? What does that feel like? Well, that creates anxiety because you're not really able to speak into the process. You're not able to speak into the goals, anything else. You just have a manager who puts out high standards. Okay, we have to sell X amount, anything like that. And that creates anxiety because you're not able to bring your concepts and ideas to work. So psychological safety and performance standards, when they are both high, that is the high performance zone right there. Why is that the high performance zone? Because there's intellectual friction, there is creative friction in a positive way, and we perform highly, come up with great ideas. What this zone can look different for different teams, but when you have high performance standards, high psychological safety, you have people sharing ideas, sharing concepts, and growing those concepts and ideas together. You're holding each other accountable, and you are meeting your performance standards. Not only are you meeting those performance standards, you're probably blowing them out of the water and coming up with new ways on how to perform even better. So this one, employees, yourself, everybody is highly engaged in the process, and they're taking ownership of everything that they're doing. You don't see a lot of finger pointing. You think, oh man, this did not work. What can I do better? What can I do to make this work? So this is the zone that we want our team to be in. It's incredibly powerful. And one thing, fear does not work. Remember, we talked about here when we have the high anxiety zone, that's what fear gets. We can have a short term effect, but it only has that short term effect if decisions don't have to be made. And the moment that you leave, that short term effect is gone. Now, we operate in a VUCA world where decisions need to be made, we collaborate, learning is necessary, and fear stops every bit of that. Because what happens when we fear is it's actually been tested physiologically where we're not able to learn as well, we're not able to make decisions. That's why we operate in a VUCA world. We have to make decisions, collaboration's required, learning is necessary, and fear stops every bit of that. Fear goes right into our mental constructs, into our amygdala, and it stops us from being able to make good decisions, stops us from learning. It really makes it difficult to collaborate because if we're working in a world in a team of fear instead of collaboration, it's going to be competition. Nothing wrong with a good competition, but when we're supposed to be collaborating, that competition needs to take a back seat to the collaboration because that is where the high performance comes from. Fear inhibits collaboration, learning, decision making. We've seen that over and over and over in physiological testing in the brain. That fear attacks the amygdala, and the amygdala just takes over, and we're not able to learn, make good decisions, or collaborate. So that's why we don't want to manage by fear. Remember, we want to manage in this high performance zone where we have high psychological safety and high performance standards, and everybody knows what those standards are, and they own the standard, and they're coming up with ways to exceed those standards, not really just meet them. They're exceeding those standards. And let's take a look at 4 stages of psychological safety that were brought forth in Timothy R. Clark's book, The 4 Stages of Psychological Safety. It's a fantastic book. There's inclusion safety, learner safety, contributor safety, and challenger safety. Now, I put these in order on purpose because you cannot have learner safety without inclusion safety, contributor safety without learner or inclusion safety, and you will never have challenger safety without contributor, learner, and inclusion safety. And you can move up and down or completely off of this continuum as well. So you as a leader, remember, it's your responsibility. You have to continually cultivate the environment of challenger safety. And what is psychological safety once we get through those 4 stages? It is, that's right, rewarded vulnerability. So let's look at inclusion safety. Inclusion safety is a basic human right. And that's how we should teach inclusion safety, as a basic human right. And what does that mean? There is no requirement, or well, there is no ticket that you need to come into the team. You have to be human and no intent to harm, period. If you're human and you don't have any intent to harm, you're included in the team. And the ways to do that within your team are to teach that. And a technique or a strategy you can use as a leader is to listen and pause. What this is very powerful. There's a whole bunch of others things that we can do to create inclusion safety. These are two very powerful ones. Feel free to contact me if you want, ghanshaw@lapu.edu, and we could look at multiple behaviors, but I have limited time here. Listening and pausing is so powerful because when we actually actively listen and we pause before we interject our own thoughts or opinion, we're showing the other person that, hey, I value what you're saying. And what's even more important is we're actually, when we actively listen, we're seeing how the ideas, concepts, or what that other person is saying connects with the team, connects with the project, whatever the discussion may be about. And we're learning. And that is so important that we learn. So that listen and pause actually shows the person that's talking that we respect them, we care about them, and we find value with them. And remember, inclusion, safety, basic human right, just have to be human, no intent to harm. And why is the no intent to harm so important? Well, that's important because the way we process physical pain and the way we process psychological pain are the same. That's why we have to have those two inclusionary things: human, no intent to harm, and that intent to harm is either psychological or physical. Now, why is it important for inclusion safety and that there is such a low threshold for inclusion? Well, that's because it is a basic human right, correct? Now, think for a minute, when have we excluded people? Timothy Clark likes to say these junk theories of superiority. So when do we have these junk theories of superiority? It's very simple when we have requirements for inclusion, like, oh, I have this degree, so education, or I have this much money, that it can be race, culture, ethnicity. Any of those are junk theories of superiority, and they have no right to stop us from being included within the team. So inclusion safety is the number one start. Then we jump right in to learner safety. And learner safety is it's okay not to know. It's okay to make a mistake. The key is when we make a mistake, we learn from it and we don't make that same mistake again. We make a whole different other mistake. Two ways to start cultivating that within your team is unite your team with learning. So use learning as something that unites. Oftentimes, learning can be used as a competition, and adopt a student mindset or adopt a beginner's mind. So you as a learner, we're role modeling all of this. We're role modeling being a student. We're role modeling that learning mindset, that beginner's mind. It's our job as a learner or our job as a leader to role model all of this. So that's how we create learner safety. And then contributor safety. That's when people feel free to put forth their ideas and contribute to something larger without fear of really reprisal from other members of the team. Like, so what does it sound like when there's not contributor safety? It's when you put out an idea and people tell you how bad the idea is or how things won't work all the time. In a team that has psychological safety, you can use certain strategies such as rotating the conducting of meetings. Simply rotate who's going to lead or conduct a meeting. And specifically, don't correct with anger, blame, or shame. So when somebody comes to you or throws an idea out with a team, you have to create that environment where if it's just straight wrong, we learn from that as well. We don't point fingers, we don't blame, we don't shame, and we certainly don't use anger. There's no room for anger because remember, anger creates fear, and fear completely shuts down any innovation whatsoever. It shuts down collaboration, decision making, and learning. This is really where we take as leaders, we take our finger off the fear button. We unleash the potential of our team. And my favorite way of doing this is in projects and meetings and such. Somebody is assigned to dissent. Somebody is assigned to have that contrary opinion. How do we assign dissent? Just say, hey, person X, I need you to be the person who's going to dissent about concepts and ideas and present alternate opinions. And that is so important because that you just gave people permission to disagree. And this is where the magic happens. Because remember, in psychological safety, it's not about being nice. It's never about being nice. That is such a common misconception. It's about being able to speak with candor. And when we assign dissent, we are giving the whole team permission to speak with candor. That is hugely important. Now, how do we do all this? How do we cultivate this as a leader? Well, we use EVT, empathy, vulnerability, trust. And remember, it's all about you as a leader to develop this. So you show empathy, you do something to create vulnerability. Like, what would one thing that we just did that would create vulnerability? Assign dissent. Ask questions. Tell people you don't know all of the answers. That will show that you're vulnerable and will allow others to be vulnerable. And then when they're vulnerable, reward them for it. And then trust. The T is for trust. Do I trust, or does the team trust? Well, you know what? Who's it start with? It starts with you as a leader. So you show your trust. You be vulnerable and trust an employee. So if you have someone on your team who may not be really meeting the standards, trust them and put them in charge of something and make clear guidance of the expectation and watch how they perform. Because if you have a psychological safe environment, that strategy will work. But if you have an environment where people fear, that strategy will completely not work and have the wrong outcomes altogether. So in a nutshell, that is psychological safety, which is one of the two ingredients. Psychological safety is required and performance standards are required to have high performing and innovative teams. If you'd like to know more about it, feel free to contact me at ghanshaw@lapu.edu or go to LAPUX and look for more courses on psychological safety. And also these two books that I talked about before, Timothy R. Clark's book, The Four Stages of Psychological Safety, and Amy Edmondson's book, The Fearless Organization, are wonderful books to read and to get ideas from. And contact me if you'd like to know more behaviors to get your team through the 4 stages of psychological safety so you can unleash their potential. There's many behaviors that we can exhibit to create psychological safety, and it's behavior based because behavior precedes feelings. What does that mean? So let's say I don't even believe in this psychological safety stuff, or maybe your team doesn't believe that they are psychologically safe. Well, it requires specific behaviors in order to change the feeling. So the behaviors will begin to change the heart or the way people feel about the team and what they can do within the team. So feel free to contact me at ghanshaw@lapu.edu, and we can go over multiple ways to look at specific behaviors that you can implement in your team. So thanks for joining me for this.